Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're with us. We have missed you. I know we've been with you, but we've been interviewing other people. I mean, we've had some great guests like Dale Bredesen and Uben Naidu and Joan London. And the podcast is just growing like crazy. So we're really grateful for you. And share it. You want them to share it.
Yeah.
Right?
So anything you learned today, we would be super grateful if you would post it and tag us. You can even take a screenshot and send it to us. It'd be awesome, and tag us in it. And go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. We are always grateful for reviews, especially 5-star reviews. That helps our rating and helps where they place us. And it will enter you into a giveaway. So it'll enter you into drawing for one of our books, either your book, The End of Mental Illness, or the Brain Warriors Way cookbook. So we still have so many questions on food. And so we're still using that book as one of the giveaways. So
because
welcome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. One of our questions for today is about food again.
So this pandemic has been hard.
It has.
Before the pandemic, anxiety disorders were really at epidemic levels. They were nearly a third of the population. And I'm betting now it's over half. The incidence of anti-anxiety drugs, antidepressants, sleep medications have just skyrocketed. How has it impacted you?
Yeah.
Now, it's not all negative. 8 out of 10 families feel like they're closer because they're have more time together, but the level of stress has gone way up.
Yeah. So what I've noticed, I've been talking to a lot of people, even on my community, is initially a lot of people were like, oh, we get this extra time together, but that wears off after time, right? Especially if you've got kids with ADD, or you've got kids, or you're trying to work and you don't have childcare. It started to get really stressful. And I think when it really hit people, in addition to all the social unrest and the election stuff, it really hit people when school came around and they're still not starting school. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from a lot of moms who were like, wait, whoa, stop. This is not okay. And so, it's been really interesting to hear people's reactions.
Well, and I think a big part of it is the uncertainty, the back and forth, that it's just not giving people time to get used to whatever the new reality.
Yeah, there's a lot of discrepancy. And also, moms sort of scrambled, and not that they liked doing the teaching, especially for little kids. I mean, try keeping a kindergartner on Zoom. It just doesn't really work well. And so a lot of moms were scrambling, and they made it work because they thought it was temporary. But the idea of starting to do that long-term is causing a lot of stress for people.
Well, they're not trained.
They're not trained
to do it. You know, most people never get training on how to be a parent.
Right.
And so,
well, and let's face it, a lot of moms, even the stay-at-home moms, they rely on that time that their kids are in school to get stuff done, to get grocery shopping, cleaning, laundry, and now it just all feels overwhelming.
So, what are things people can do to retain their sanity? What are some of the things you've done to retain yours?
Well, I can't say I've been perfect at retaining it, but
I agree with that.
I did so well for the first couple months, and then I just kind of like done with this, sort of like a lot of other people. And now I'm in the same position. I'm scrambling, trying to get 3 kids registered for school, and I have no idea what we're doing. So I think for me, I know for me, it's interesting. Exercise has always been my medicine. So no matter what, everybody knows they need to let me exercise. It's better for their benefit if I exercise. And
I second that.
Yeah. And meditation. When I get away from it, I just find myself, when I don't focus on what I'm grateful for, I find myself right now focusing on what I'm irritated about. And so you're going to focus on one thing or the other. The glass is half full, the glass is half empty. You have to train yourself to focus on the right things. And it's not easy when you've got so many things coming at you, but you can do it. And the third thing is I'd gotten, I think everybody got a little bit lazy with their diet. I mean, they call it the COVID-19. I mean, for us being lazy with our diet.
The COVID cushion.
Yeah. So for us being lazy with our diet is a little different than probably the average person. It still means we're eating about 85 to 90% healthy, but I noticed that. So I really decided this was when I was going to do a cleanse. I've got, one of the kids doing it with me, but then also after that, eating super clean. And so I'm doing sort of our version. Our food, one of the questions was about food rules. Our food rules are in many of our books. They're definitely in Brain Warriors Way and Brain Warriors Way cookbook, which is where the recipes are. And one of the food rules is, eliminating all those things that make you feel bad. And so I got really serious about doing that. And for me, that looks like sort of a paleo keto modified with extra greens, but that's really what works for me. And that doesn't work for everybody, by the way. It depends on your brain type. Some people need a little more of the smart carbs, some sweet potatoes or apple or something. But for me, when I really cut back on all those carbs, do really high fat, high protein, lots of greens and fiber, I feel like a different person. My focus, my energy, everything is more positive.
So what diet really works best for you? I mean, ultimately, it's high quality calories, not too many of them. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I could just feel it that, things are a little tighter. And throughout the pandemic, I've been exercising. But things were just a little tighter. So I actually put a tape measure around my waist, and it's optimal when it's 31. It was like 34. And I'm like, that's irritating. And
some of that's inflammation and bloating. It goes away somewhat quickly.
Well, it's the chronic stress. Right. I lost my dad, managing our 8, soon to be 9 clinics. We had to close New York. I mean, there's a lot. And so for me, I start counting. I mean, everything I eat. And we have a little scale on the counter, weigh, measure it. And it's just like, got to go on a budget, dude. Mm-hmm. And now my waist is 32. So almost back. And it just, I hate wasting money, that I think of calories the same way. You should stop wasting calories. Know how many you're putting in your body, and the quality matters just as much as the quantity. Both matter.
And we have several podcasts, and even on, I have a blog on my site, if you go to tanaamen.com, on food and mood, because it is a little different for everybody. And that's where we differ. People often ask, why is your program different than paleo or different than, some of these other programs? It's different because we take your brain type into account. So that's a question we get all the time. How many carbs should I be eating, carbs or no carbs? Should I go high protein, low carb? What should I do? And it really does depend on you. Now, if you're going to eat carbs, we want you eating smart carbs. So, all those rules are in Brain Warriors Way. You can find them on my website, tanaamen.com. The cookbook really helps you to eat that way all the time. But for me, that is just a huge thing with my mood.
Well, and you can go to brainhealthassessment.com and for free know your brain type. And as part of the information you'll get is, well, what should I be eating? Mm-hmm. High protein, high smart carbohydrate, we're a fan of healthy fat. So all of the diets have healthy fat, but you cheat more toward protein or more toward smart carbohydrates, and you will be able to know. So in dealing with anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief, getting into a routine, and the two things we talked about today, exercise, absolutely critical, head to head against antidepressants. They've been found to be equally effective. And get your diet right for your brain type. Mm-hmm. Just know everybody's stressed during this time. The people who will thrive, they have stress management practices. And I think for you, it's exercise. Same for me. I do 40 minutes of meetings in the morning while I'm walking, right? I'm just moving. So have a routine that works for you. When we come back, we're going to talk about more specific strategies for dealing with anxiety. Mm-hmm. Whatever you've learned, please write it down, take a picture of it, post it on any of your social media sites. Go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com Leave us a comment, question, or review, and we'll enter you in for a drawing for either The End of Mental Illness, my new book, or Tana's cookbook, The Brain Warrior's Way. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We are talking about pandemonium today. So how are you handling the pandemic? It's been going on and on and on, and we had hope and we got excited that it was ending, and oh, just kidding. And then school is starting, and we're talking about all these things, but we want to know strategies. We want to hear from you too. What are your strategies? What have you been doing that's been helping you, or what have you been doing that's been hurting you? Because you clearly can do one or the other. Help yourself or hurt yourself. So we are talking about pandemonium today.
And before we get into it, think about one thing that you might learn, and then at the end, write it down, take a picture of it, and post it on any of your social media sites and hashtag Brain Warriors Way podcast. Help us grow this podcast, because what I say in The End of Mental Illness, it will begin with a revolution in brain health. So help us get this podcast to as many people as possible. So we've been talking about anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief, and healing those, dealing with those really starts by getting your brain right. So eating right, exercising, and then not doing things that hurt your brain. So being repetitively on phone games over and over and over again, it'll cause your brain to melt. New learning is one of the great strategies to optimize your brain.
See, I decided to redo the house during this time. That really helped me.
I know, but chronic stress, which is what's happening to me, does not help. New learning, not new paint.
And someone should have told me, like I should have thought about it, or someone should have let me know before I got rid of the furniture that we were going to have a hard time finding furniture. So there's like delays on everything. So yeah, but that actually helped me get out of my head.
All right. New learning is a very important strategy. We talked about exercise. New learning. It's critical to decrease inflammation, which is a major cause of depression. And so omega-3 fatty acids, and then killing the process.
Well, and right. And that's one problem with pandemic is that when it first started, people were like, oh, I can't get the food I normally eat. I can't find organic. I guess I'm eating gluten. I guess I'm eating rice, like things that a lot of us don't. If you're a brain warrior, you don't normally eat some of those things. But because we were a little nervous and we were having a hard time finding our normal stuff, we started eating things, and then we got in that habit. And so we were just grateful that, it's like, we're grateful we have food. There was plenty of food, just maybe not what you were looking for. But that did lead to inflammation for a lot of people, which then affects your mood. So we've been hearing a lot of that. It certainly happened over here. I'm really affected by food, maybe more than some people. But that will affect you. And sitting, because we have been sitting so much, watching old movies with our kids, doing all these things, when you are in the house, that increases inflammation. That alone is going to make you feel terrible.
And it's critical to avoid head injuries. So be really careful. We had a fuss on the new mats that we got, because almost
the new kitchen mats,
tripped on them. I'm like, she's trying to kill me. She's trying to get rid of me early.
Definitely not.
And avoiding toxins. They're just everywhere. And when the pandemic started, people just bought disinfectants without reading the labels.
I bleached everything and stripped off the surfaces. And but it's a good point, because we got ants. Whenever someone does construction in our neighborhood, right now it's us, it for some reason causes the ants to come in our house. Since we had this ant infestation in my daughter's room, and I see her walking into her room with a can of Raid. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm going to spray this. All of our windows are closed. And I'm like, please tell me you haven't been spraying that with closed windows. I mean, that's highly toxic. So we have a non-toxic spray we use. It's called Orange Guard or something. It works really well. But anyways, the point being non-toxic. Make sure you're doing something non-toxic.
Including what you put on your hands, what you put under your arms, what you put on your body. Because whatever goes on your body goes in your body and affects your body.
And oh, by the way, cruciferous vegetables actually help to detoxify. So warm water with lemon and ginger, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, those types of veggies really help.
And it's so important if you want to manage anxiety and depression to not get diabetes, because diabetes can increase the risk. And this is where your food really matters. There's so many people that are pre-diabetic, actually more than a third of the population.
I am naturally pre-diabetic.
And so
I have to watch it. That's why I'm so careful.
And so getting rid of sugar and foods that quickly turn to sugar become absolutely essential.
And I'm sort of, it's sort of amazing, but even in this day and age, I don't know that a lot of people really understand the full impact or implication of diabetes type 2. Type 1's a whole different animal, but I don't know that people it's like, oh, that would suck, I have to take medication. No, it's so much worse than that. And people don't really realize that. Because I grew up with my grandmother having to take care of her. She didn't move in with us so she could take care of me when I was a kid. It was so I could help take care of her. But she went legally blind. She lost her hair. She almost lost her toes. She got heart disease. I mean, there's not one thing about this disease that's going to make your life better. So it's going to affect you in all kinds of ways.
It damages blood vessels,
right?
Which it makes your blood vessels brittle and more likely to break, which means you're more likely to have a stroke, having cardiovascular disease. It delays healing. I had a father-in-law who had it, and he told me when he was 55 that if I have to take insulin, I'm going to kill myself.
Right.
And he had to take insulin. He didn't kill himself, but diabetes killed him.
Right.
It took his eyes, it took his heart, it took his legs, and
so he lost his
it took
legs.
his mind.
Yeah.
No, this is not something you want. When your doctor diagnoses you as pre-diabetic,
it's serious.
You need to think of it as an emergency.
Yeah, I feel like we toss the word around so much about diabetes and pre-diabetes and obesity that it just sort of, people are a little numb to what it really means.
All right, so I promised them tips on overcoming anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief. So I
talked about mine. Let's talk about yours.
Well, I want to give them some specific things to do. And we're actually working on a new public television special that is going to come out the end of February together.
So it might be helpful to get their ideas too. Let's have them communicate with us. Please go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. Tell us what you've been doing to manage your stress and anxiety. If it's been really helpful for you, we want to hear about it.
And one thing, or certain sense, using all 5 of your senses, and your sense of smell is really critical. So lavender, peppermint, jasmine, honeysuckle, vanilla, find scents that work for you when you're anxious, when you're sad, when you're upset. And just play around with essential oils to see if any can reset your brain.
Yeah, Chloe, our 17-year-old daughter, she really was affected. She was depressed, and she got really affected by this whole thing because she's very social. And so she likes to be out and moving. And so she didn't do well, but she ordered one of those diffusers, and she does lavender and some other thing. And it's not only smells good, she actually says it really helps her to settle down.
The other thing, or saunas have actually been found to decrease depression. One sauna was found to have antidepressant effects. So that can help, knowing your brain type. And then we'll also tell you, what supplements tend to help with this or that type. There are actually 16 different types. For grief, and so many of us have experienced grief. I lost my father a couple of months ago. And what I've told my patients for years is don't wait to heal grief. The week after he died, Tana would come into my office and I'd just be there crying.
Just listening to his voicemails.
And I knew that I couldn't avoid it. and I needed to feel it. And I ended up writing a poem that I did at his funeral called Good Grief. He's everywhere. And so embracing the feelings, embracing the sadness, and then not letting any of the ants steal your happiness. Like I didn't do enough. And it's like, no, for the last 5 years, I did as much as I could. Right. So managing your thoughts, not pie in the sky happy thinking, but accurate thinking really helps you deal with grief. And we always say with grief, fix sleep first. Fix sleep first, because if you sleep right, you are then going to be more likely to think right. And one last tip on trauma. We have an exercise we're going to talk about in the show called bridging, that whenever you react and you're like angrier than you should be, or sadder than you should be, or more anxious than you should be, really try to go, what am I thinking and feeling? And then go back to the first time you had that. So one of my patients is African American, and when the pandemonium started, the societal unrest, that whole week she was just so anxious. And I had her close her eyes and really think about what she's thinking and feeling. And then when's the first time she thought, she went immediately back to 5 years old, to racial conflict that was really upsetting for her, that she didn't understand. And she'd actually internalized that negative feeling for 35 years. And so I had her think about it while I had her stroke from cross your arms, go to your shoulders, and then just stroke down your arms for 30 seconds and really relive that with your adult self sitting next to you. And after about 2 minutes, it completely calmed down the anxiety. So there's so much that you can do. So I hope this has been helpful for you. What you learned today, write it down, take a picture of it, post it on any of your social media sites, then leave us a comment, question, or review at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, and we'll enter you into a drawing to win either the End of Mental Illness or Tana's cookbook, The Brain Warriors Way. Stay with us. We're going to answer your questions and also talk about Brain in the News. You're in a war for the health of your brain. Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Amen, founder of Amen Clinics and Amen University. My wife Tana and I created the Brain Warriors Way course. It's 26 hours of content where we walk you through how to have a better brain and a better life. If you want to survive and thrive, you have to become a brain warrior. Welcome back. We are so grateful you are here with us. In this episode, we're going to talk about brain in the news. And the brain has just been in the news so much.
Yeah, it really has. So anything you learn, questions, concerns, or especially what you've learned, if you would post it and tag us, we'd be grateful. If you want to take a screenshot and send it to us, that'd be awesome. And if you go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com and leave us a review, 5 stars are always welcome, obviously. That helps us, get our message out there quicker. It will enter you into a drawing for one of our books, either The End of Mental Illness or the Brain Warriors Way cookbook. You get to choose. So if you go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com and do that, and also tell us what's going on in your life, we would love to hear it.
So, brain in the news, what has been going on in the news? So much. Mm-hmm. And early on in the pandemic, it was reported that people lost their sense of smell and their sense of taste. So that's clearly brain in the news. And then, so that means COVID-19 in a fairly high percentage of patients, it's impacting your nervous system. It's impacting your brain. And so many people have sort of the seriousness of it, and that worries me because I am afraid this is going to become like some of the other pandemics where the virus really ends up impacting the brain for a long time. And we're actually scanning people who've had COVID-19, and it's had a significant impact on them.
Well, and part of the problem is we keep hearing like this misinformation going around, or we hear that there's, the numbers are not correct. And so it gets people not believing it. But let's make no mistake, the virus is real. The numbers might not be 100% accurate, but you still don't want this virus, right? So whatever your personal, philosophical, or political beliefs are, the virus is still devastating. So that's the part, and it's not for everybody, it's different for everybody. But if we don't know the impact, and that's the problem.
Right. And it could end up being like Lyme disease, where you might not even know you had it. A lot of people who had COVID-19 didn't know they had it, but, a month later, a year later.
Well, on the microclotting issue.
They're affected. And speaking about the microclotting issue, it's frightening. When they released some of the first autopsy reports on people who died from COVID-19, and they looked at their liver, at their kidneys, at their heart, and their brain, what they're seeing are just a myriad of these little tiny clots that the virus seems to have an impact on platelets. And that microclotting may actually be doing most of the damage.
And we don't know what the long-term damage from that is going to be.
And we don't know the long-term impact. I just know my mom, dad, and sister have it. My mom and sister seem to be doing just fine. My dad really never recovered, but it wasn't the only thing causing his death. But I have an employee that we just dearly love who was young, who ended up on a ventilator in New
hospital
York
for almost 2 months.
For almost 2 months.
Yeah.
So be smart and do the right things. We often say that don't worry, be happy people die the earliest from accidents and preventable illnesses. And this, in large part, is preventable if you do the right things. And, mental hygiene is just as important as washing your hands, which means you should wash your hands. And you also need to wash your thoughts. Also, brain in the news, there's a new nasal spray that's been approved for treating suicidal patients.
So
Johnson & Johnson came out with Spravato, and it's been approved as the first antidepressant for actively suicidal people. And actually, it's a form of ketamine, which is an anesthetic.
We use it all the time.
That has been found to work for a certain percentage of people. It's expensive. It's not the first thing I would do, but it gives hope for people who may be in a crisis.
Right. And we want to talk about, of course, drug overdoses, mental health concerns as this pandemic continues. We know right off the bat there were the calls to the suicide hotline were up 1,000%. And so that's a problem. Obviously, suicide is up. But as unemployment and these things, especially as checks start to run out, for every percentage point of unemployment that went up, there was a 3-fold increase in opiate use, correct? Opiate addiction. And
went
so,
up 3.4%.
Okay.
So the unemployment rate went up from 3% to almost 20%. And so you just think
watch
that
this
addiction
explosion.
can
And it's
skyrocket, which means now is a time to be more diligent about your brain and mental health, not give yourself an excuse to smoke more pot or drink more alcohol.
right. Well, and they're saying that the overdoses now, not just addiction, overdoses are up 30 to 40%. So that's pretty crazy. And it's, you can see it though. You see some people do fine when they're at home. I have a mother who lives alone, and I was so worried about her. I wanted her to come stay with us. And she's like, I want nothing to do with coming to your house. And she is actually doing great by herself.
Did she
which
really
surprised
say
me.
it that way?
Yeah, sort of. pretty close. So she's like, I'm independent. I want to do my own thing, but she's doing actually really, really well. But then I see other people who they really just can't seem to keep it together because they're so lonely and so by themselves, and it's just overwhelming and trying to do everything on their own, and it's just too much. And we see mothers that are, you know, having to deal with ADD and OCD kids that are not doing well and they're self-medicating, and it's really been an avalanche of things we've seen. So it makes sense that people are stressed out and they're looking for something, but that's not the thing to look for. So finding healthier alternatives is really important.
Well, and that's why video conferencing is just so important. And Amen Clinics is open. We've been open the whole time. I mean, we considered ourselves an essential medical service. And so all 8 of our clinics have been open. And if you need to talk to someone, if you need to be seen, we're doing video conferencing literally with people around the world.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And I've been doing some live chats on my Facebook and Instagram page with our doctors, and they have been exploding. And it just shows me the need. It shows me the need of the people and what they're sending in their questions, and it's fantastic. So
we have those resources for you. I've done 75 live chats during the pandemic. Tana's done a bunch, so you can find Tana on Facebook, Tana Amen, or Dr. Daniel Amen on Facebook, and you know, any night, you know, we may show up. So follow us for sure.
So even if you are struggling with resources, there are so many free resources on both of our websites, Amen Clinic's website. So don't let that be a reason not to reach out and try to get some help. And we would love to hear from you. If you're struggling, if you're having problems or questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. Leave us your questions, your comments. Go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com and leave us a review. Good reviews are always welcome. And it will enter you into a drawing for either the End of Mental Illness or the Brain Warriors Way cookbook. So you get to choose.
And if we read your question on air, you'll automatically get a book from either of us. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We are so grateful to you as our community, and we're just thankful that you're here with us this week. And in this episode, we're going to answer your questions about the pandemic, about stress related to the pandemic, about challenges you're having at home, and lots of other things.
But before we do, whatever you learn, if you could just keep notes, I think that's a great thing. I'm always writing notes to myself on what I want to keep. And then take a picture of it, post it on any of your social media sites about how this episode may help you. So question number 1, natural remedies for OCD, please.
Exercise for sure.
Exercise boosts serotonin. So it's actually one of the most searched terms on the internet. How do you naturally boost serotonin? Exercise, smart carbohydrates. So people who have OCD probably should not go on the
keto or strict
diet
keto.
Or keto. It can make them pretty irritable.
Yeah, Chloe, our 17-year-old, she wanted to, be really healthy, and so she did a really strict version of keto. And I kept telling her, you probably need some more carbs. She started spinning on negative thoughts, and so because she's got a super busy brain. So be careful if you've got a busy brain or OCD. You probably need to throw in maybe some sweet potato or half of an apple with some almond butter. You don't want to go crazy. Don't have dumb carbs, but some smart carbs can actually settle you down. And then also, what about things like GABA or 5-HTP?
5-HTP, so serotonin mood support, or happy saffron, or brain MD supplements can help. GABA can help the anxiety. And then thought stopping. So when you get a thought in your head that's happened more than 3 times, get up physically and go do something else. And when you are tempted to check, don't. And you're like, oh, well, that's not easy. And I know initially the anxiety will skyrocket, but every time you give in to the compulsive behavior, you make it more likely you're going to give into it again. So fighting the urge can really help fight OCD.
When you talk about thought stopping, it reminds me when I meditate, because sometimes, you'll have these random thoughts pop in your head that you don't want to think about. And you're trying to settle yourself down and calm yourself down. And all of a sudden your list pops in your head. And I always imagine a big broom just sort of pushing it away. It's like, okay, take a deep breath and then just start over. Don't beat yourself up. Just start over.
Yeah, that's really great. Hey, I also want to read a review. We haven't been reading reviews.
Oh.
Brain Warrior Equals Better Life by Delta 2006. I was delighted with the recent episodes on interactive metronome. I've used this intervention with children with autism and ADHD and adults with sensory processing disorders, and with a 95-year-old woman post-stroke. The elderly woman regained her ability to use both of her hands together to prepare simple meals. Her standing, balance, and tolerance improved from 2 minutes to more than 30 minutes. Her daughter reported that her mother seemed sharper after receiving the interactive metronome and occupational therapy. After the intervention during my personal training period, I noticed that my typing speed, previously at 60 words per minute, was considerably faster. I recommend the podcast to teachers and families with whom I currently work.
I love that.
Keep the episodes coming.
So apparently that episode on the metronome it skyrocketed. It did incredibly well. It was one of our best performing. And what I love about our podcast is there's things that we get to research all these things and learn all these things from these experts. I didn't even realize that was a big therapy. I didn't realize it was as big as it was. And it just was people were so interested in it.
You should hang out with me more often.
I know.
All right. Another question. Can COVID-19 cause brain damage? We answered that one. The answer is absolutely it can. And your best defense against COVID-19
immunity.
Is your immune system.
Keep your inflammation down and your immune system strong.
Along with that question, what are the lingering side effects? Fatigue seems to be one of the real.
But I don't know that we really know long term.
Well, we don't, because this thing's only been known for this year.
So I worry about, because of this microclotting, I worry that long-term damage to organs is what we're going to, they're going to, but it's slow, like a slow burning fire, kind of like inflammation, but it's going to start showing up later. Yeah. So what's going to happen to the brains of children with ADHD and autism spectrum disorders from wearing masks? Not only their brain health due to lack of oxygen, but also their social skills due to not being able to properly see people's facial expressions because everyone has a mask on. Hello, this has been my concern all along. So I've been really worried about
there
this.
There are whole societies that wear facial
And that
coverings.
doesn't mean that it's not bad for you.
No, but I think you should not put everybody on an N95 respirator. That facial coverings do a couple of things. One, they decrease the spread. And two, it just reminds you you're in the middle of a pandemic. We need to be thoughtful and careful on how we interact with people.
So people like this about our show, most of them, is that we often have some spirited interaction about this, because I agree with you about obviously that's rational. You want to slow the spread of the virus or stop it. But I actually really resonate with this person who wrote this. Having 3 kids at school, and one of them is 10. We've got our 2 nieces living with us. So the 10-year-old, I worry these kids, one of 2 things is going to happen. They're not going to be able to have their normal activity level. Obviously, they're already slowing that down, but they're not going to get that exercise, because I got to tell you, when I wear a mask and I'm out moving and it's hot outside, I feel nauseous, dizzy, I don't feel good. So these kids are so active, it's going to really decrease their activity levels. And she had a good point about kids with ADD. They really need to be able to move. And so I actually really resonate with you when you're talking about this. And I don't necessarily have the answer. And I think that's part of why they're doing distance learning, at least in California. We're starting school at home because we couldn't agree on that. The parents and the teachers and the district could not agree on many of those things. And then additionally, though, I agree with you about the facial coverings and being able to read people's faces, because I really do think that being able to read people's faces, understanding social cues is vital. So we need to come up with an exercise. If people are wearing masks, we need to really have some way to help these kids understand.
Well, and perhaps when they're exercising, they're not wearing masks. That
But they haven't
wouldn't
come
be
up with that yet
a
in
good
California.
idea. That, we just have to be thoughtful and careful. The whole issue with masks and autism is really hard because those kids have sensory processing disorders. They don't like change, and it becomes really painful. On TACA's website, TACA now.org, they actually have videos about how to manage kids with ADHD and autism and masks.
And that's so critical. Do you remember the day Chloe came home? Our daughter works at a restaurant, and she came home almost in tears. She felt so bad for this woman that came to the she's a host, and it's an outdoor restaurant, but you still have to wear masks to your table. And it's just a rule and everybody has to do it. But this woman came and she had a child who was autistic. And, some of the people had the attitude, well, then don't bring your kid out. If you can't get your kid to wear a mask, then don't bring your kid out. But my daughter had a chance to actually talk to her, and just her heart broke for this woman because she's like, I can't leave my house. I can't go to the grocery store. I mean, we don't really think about those implications for people until you really hear it from their perspective. And so Chloe went and talked to her manager. She's like, is there anything we can do? And they made it happen. They took her through a back way where she wasn't going to be exposed to people and isolated a table for them. They actually made it work. So I think using your voice, my point is, if you actually don't just get angry and frustrated with people, but actually take a minute to try to connect with people, gain rapport, and get them to hear your story, I think you're going to find more people will want to help you. So,
all right, one more question. Would really appreciate, this is from Jesse Batoni, would really appreciate it if you can tell me which BrainMD supplements would help my temporal lobes and help me focus. So focus and energy for focus. And we often like GABA calming to help relax, prevent temporal lobe issues. We're so grateful that you listen to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. If you've learned anything, please leave us a comment, question, or review from Brain Warriors Way at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. Whatever you learned, post it on any of your social media sites, hashtag Brain Warriors Way podcast. If you share it with the people you know need it, we would be grateful as well.
if you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.